It was such a simple idea, a daily tally of the, quote, lies, exaggerations, and deceptions of the bombastic Republican candidate for president. Turned out it became an international hit. That was last September in a race that few expected Donald Trump to win. Well, we know how that turned out, and now Daniel Dale continues to cover the new president and the remarkable spectacle coming out of Washington, D.C. For more from the U.S. Capitol, there's Daniel Dale, Washington correspondent with the Toronto Star. Daniel, it's good to see you again. How's things down there?
Things are interesting as usual. Thanks for having me, Steve.
Interesting is a nice way to put it. Well, let's just get started on this what do we want to call it? The lies, exaggeration, and deception tracker. How did that idea come to you?
You know, I follow Twitter quite obsessively most work days, and it struck me that, you know, while journalists were fact-checking the many false statements that candidate Donald Trump was making, those fact checks weren't making their way into the final product, whether it was a TV segment or a newspaper article. So anyone just reading the paper in the morning or watching the evening news might have come away with the impression that Donald Trump had been a normal candidate that day, when in fact he would say, truly, without hyperbole, 20 or more false statements in a day. And so I thought, you know, there needed to be a way to sort of focus attention on the deception. So that's what I tried to do with the list.
Well, speaking of attention, Canada has been getting quite a bit in Washington these days. We saw Justin Trudeau mentioned in President Trump's speech to Congress not too long ago. And now Politico has apparently named you the breakout media star of 2016, dubbing you the lie tracker. I know you're a modest Canadian, but honestly, what's it like to get called that by an organization like Politico?
It was cool. I mean, I'll be modest for a second. I think I was one of 16 on the list, so it wasn't just me. But no, I mean, when you hear as a Canadian, you don't expect anyone to pay attention to you pretty much ever, you know, other than your Canadian readers and your friends and family. You know, there's so many reporters here, so many American reporters. So to get any kind of recognition was unexpected and great.
Now, it's obviously important for the historical record to be accurate, so that work that you are doing is important from that standpoint. But given how few people seem to be, well, let me put it this way. Given how many people don't seem to not care at all whether Donald Trump speaks the truth or not, do you feel as if it's really making a difference, the work that you're doing?
Well, I do. I mean, I push back a bit when people very fairly, as you did, say that, you know, a lot of Trump supporters just don't care whether he's telling the truth or lying. You know, I don't think that the feelings of, you know, his hardcore base, say 25% of voters, so maybe, you know, 15 or 10% of the population, needs to dictate how we operate. I think there is a significant constituency in America, as elsewhere, for facts. People still want to know whether their leaders are telling the truth. And these U.S. elections are so close. You know, this 2016 election was decided by less than 1% of the vote in a few states. So my attitude is, you know, I'm not so arrogant to think that I'm going to sway an election. But even if you do, you know, get more facts to, you know, 1%, that can make a real difference here. So that's how I look at it.
Daniel, what's fascinating, I guess, about your assignment now is that in some respects, it's not a lot different from the assignment you previously had. Yes, you're covering Donald Trump now, but before that, you covered Toronto City Hall, where the mayor at the time was Rob Ford. And in some respects, Ford was Trump before Trump when it came to politics. I presume you see a lot of the similarities between the two men?
I do, yeah, and there are a lot of days where it's almost eerie, you know, a little thing here and there where Trump is just so reminiscent of Ford. I do think that Trump has gone far beyond Ford, and people laugh when I say this, but I mean it. You know, in the level of lying, the frequency of lying, the grandness of lying, and especially in the way that he's attempted to use what I think is clearly bigotry, xenophobia, to improve his electoral prospects. You know, whatever you think of Ford, you can argue he was homophobic, you can argue that he was racist, but he made a real effort to reach out to people from diverse communities in Toronto. We have not seen that from Donald Trump, and I think we've seen quite the opposite.
No, I think it's fair to say Rob Ford may have said some things that sounded xenophobic, but in his heart, he and his family made, I think, a pretty good case that he was not. But I want to compare how you did your job when you were in Toronto with the way you do it now in Washington. I mean, when you were covering Rob Ford, you could at least talk to the guy. I'm going to guess that it's quite possible that if you're down there for the full 4 years during Donald Trump's first term, you may never get to say a word to him ever. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's very likely. I will never get to ask a question or otherwise interact with Trump. Yeah, it's totally different for sure.
Do you find that odd?
I think it's what I expected. I expected it to have this kind of non-relationship with President Hillary Clinton or President Jeb Bush or Marco Rubio or some more conventional figure than this one. It is a bit of an unusual thing to devote so much time to covering someone and never once speak to them. But I think I went in with the expectation that I would have this little access. So I'm used to it, and it's what I thought, how I thought it would be. Yeah.
Rob Ford, of course, frequently used to say the media were lying about him and reporting falsehoods and so on. And as it turned out, your original reporting on the existence of that videotape and some of the things he said on that videotape, turned out to be accurate. Donald Trump is saying the same kind of things, painting all of the mainstream media with quite a broad brush. Does that affect your ability to report on his administration?
I don't think it affects our ability to do the reporting. I think it does affect how people perceive the reporting, and that's the issue. The issue here is that he is making a systematic effort, as Ford did, to discredit everything that we do, so that the next time we come out with some scoop, some story that reveals wrongdoing, people are gonna be suspicious of it. And so it's a real challenge, not really, to get the information. I don't think we need access or a friendly administration to get the information, but in getting people to believe that what we're saying is correct.
Now, again, a bit of a personal question here, if I may, and that is when you were covering Ford's administration, it got very nasty at times, and he said some things about you that were quasi-libelous, and there were lawyers involved and so on. And, I don't know where it's going to go with Donald Trump, but clearly some of the crazy things that you have had to report on may be personally problematic for you. But on the other hand, they are building you a bigger platform, a bigger name, and a more interesting career. Do you find it ironic that you've got a bit of a double-edged sword on your hands here?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah. It's always good to have people reading and retweeting and paying attention to what you do. I don't know if I would ask for beats like this. I think it would be fun and interesting to cover a politician who wasn't quite so outlandish or offensive or dishonest for a change. But yeah, I tell people who ask, they say, this must be so exhausting and difficult, emotionally taxing. It is sometimes, but it's also a privilege, especially as a foreigner, as a Canadian, to get a chance to have, maybe not a front row seat, but a seat for this kind of history. Yeah, it's really great in its own way.
Do you show up at those daily briefings that Sean Spicer gives?
No, I've never gone. I can go, but I just find they're televised. I can watch them from my desk, and so the utility of going is pretty low.
Are they useful to your reporting at all?
Sometimes. Sometimes they shed light on administration thinking. Sometimes Spicer says something outlandish himself. He'll discredit media outlets. He'll discredit the Congressional Budget Office that provides, independent assessments of the impact of legislation. He'll say what sounded like Joe Trudeau. So Spicer, I think, has probably made news of his own more than his boss, the president, would like.
Indeed. And I guess for the record, have you asked Spicer for an interview with the president?
No, I haven't. I think there's clearly no hope, so I haven't even tried.
Okay. One of the things that clearly has happened since Donald Trump became president is there are a group of, I guess, well-known anti-Trump entertainers and or journalists who are really capturing the public's attention in a much more significant way. You think of Rachel Maddow on MSNBC. You can think of Stephen Colbert in late-night television, Trevor Noah on The Daily Show, and the list goes on. I want to play a little snippet here of Stephen Colbert on The Late Show with his old friend Jon Stewart, who used to host the Daily Show, and then I'll get you to comment on this bite, okay? Sheldon, roll it if you would.
This breakup with Donald Trump has given you, the media, an amazing opportunity for self-reflection and improvement. Instead of worrying about whether Trump is un-American or if he thinks you're the enemy, or if he's being mean to you, or if he's going to let you go back into the briefings, do something for yourself. Self-improvement. Take up a hobby. I recommend journalism. You know, I think this breakup is going to be the best thing that ever happened to you.
Well, Daniel, what do you say?
I think he's right, and I think we saw that with the Ford mayoralty in Toronto also. You know, when you don't have to worry about, cozying up to the administration, building those relationships, taking people out for coffee because you know that they hate you, they have contempt for you, that is liberating in a way, and it does, I think, give you more time and more sort of leeway to do real digging. So I think, access is helpful for some kinds of palace intrigue stories that are quite readable. But there's a ton of other kinds of journalism that don't require them to like you or be nice to you. And I think we're seeing a lot of that already in the early days of the Trump administration.
Well, Jon Stewart's advice to journalists all across America was, take up a hobby. I recommend journalism. The suggestion seems to be that too many journalists spend too much time trying to curry favor with high-ranking White House sources and not enough time holding the powerful to account. Does he have a point?
I think probably. I've only been here 2 years, so I don't want to cast too harsh judgment on, the way that my colleagues behaved during the Obama tenure or the Bush tenure, for example. But it seems to me in general, yeah. I mean, we all, at every level of journalism, I think we spend a lot of time, trying to build relationships to get doled out little scooplets, that don't really add value in the way that, real difficult investigative stuff does. So yeah, I think he probably does have a point.
In which case, let's finish up on this. Do you think the media have a different role to play given who the president is today?
I think so. I think the role is always to hold the person in power to account. But I think this is a really unique president. We have never seen a serial liar like this in the Oval Office. So I think there's a new level of responsibility to the truth. We haven't had a president, at least in modern history, who has systematically attacked the press in this kind of way. And so I think there's a new responsibility to defend and explain press freedom. So I think Trump presents a whole host of challenges that we just haven't seen in modern times. And
do you think you're up for it?
I think so. I mean, I'm one guy sitting in my home office as a Canadian, so I don't feel like it's on my shoulders, but I think I can contribute in some way.
No, Daniel, it's all on your shoulders. Never mind the Washington Post or the New York Times. It's all up to you. No, I'm kidding. It's not all up to you. Yeah. It's really good of you to find some time for us in your schedule to be with us here on TVO tonight. We wish you well, having reported on one crazy town and are now in another.
Thank you very much.
Daniel Dale, Washington correspondent, Toronto Star.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit TVO.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.